Namaste. Put my glasses down here. Namaste. Welcome. Beautiful souls, welcome. My name is Sadhana. And today I'm here to share with you more insights into the Wildwood Tarot. And my intention is to slowly work through this deck in a way that piques your interest, helps you to make more sense of the deck so that it's a deck that you're comfortable using. And I have found quite a profound connection with this deck, and I'm hoping that through a step-by-step process, you too can find some comfort and ease in working with these cards, because there's a lot to be offered here. I also want to let you know that I have been gifted a Greenway Tarot, and I'm really looking forward to receiving it. And eventually, later in the series, I will be able to offer some of my reflections on that as well too. The difference between the deck that came before the Wildwood and the Wildwood Tarot. But now we're talking about this one. And in the first video, in case you weren't here, I just want to go through some of the things that we were talking about. So I've got a lot of overlays, and I will do my best to not move through things too quickly. So in the first video, I was asking you to reflect on the deck, the fact that half the deck is affected by the sun and half the deck is affected by the moon. And this is a really unusual way of contemplating a deck. From the spring equinox to the autumnal equinox, the 19th card in this tarot deck has an influence. And that influence is strongest at the top, so at the midsummer solstice, June 21st. Conversely, the moon on water, the 18th card, has a more of an influence on the cards from the autumnal equinox to the spring equinox, with its peak of energy being focused on the midwinter solstice. And so there's this waxing and waning effect to the sun and a waxing and waning effect to the moon as it influences the different cards in the deck. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to look at one of the seasons. I want to go to, I believe I showed you this one last time as well too. Hello, Andrew. Hello, Woven Pixel. Thanks for joining me. And I'm doing these live for my ease. It's just easier with recording, but also if you have any questions, then you can pop in and ask your questions. The basic thing that I think that throws people off with this deck is that the seasons, the beginning of the seasons, are at the quarters, at the diagonal lines. So in the Northern Hemisphere right now, we are in the season of the spring, and that began on February 1st. And in the Southern Hemisphere right now, we're in the season of autumn, which began at August 1st. And so depending on where you live in the world, we will be, of course, in a different aspect of this deck. Today, I'm going to talk about the season of spring, and tomorrow I'm going to talk about the season of autumn, because I think it's a good idea to look at these two side by side, especially when this is where we are in the world at this time, but also to reflect on the different energy of the shaman and the seer, and to perhaps reflect on why the shaman oversees the spring, the element of air, and why the seer oversees the element of water and the season of autumn. And I too sometimes stumble on my words with this deck because I have a slightly different perception of the seasons from where I grew up, where I live, where the heat of the summer is. And even though I have been many times around the wheel with this deck, it's still, what I want to say, this deck wants to be its own thing. And the more you let it be its own thing, the more it works for you. And it has so many beautiful offerings. And if you try to impose your system on this deck, it may rub up against it. It may absorb it. It's some decks are funny that way. But what I'm offering here is the teachings based on the heart of this deck, and trying not to impose anything else from any other systems or any other decks on this deck. So today, hello, Angela, Tiny Trinkets and Tarot. We're going to look at the season of spring, the shaman, the element of arrows. I'm going to go to this one. So today, and I know you can't see my cursor, I'm using my pointer, but we're going to look at arrows in the season of air, which is spring, which began not too long ago and goes right through to Beltane. Hello, Bran Love. Thanks for joining. And so this is kind of, the topic of conversation today. I'm going to switch and show you. I have to just adjust the cord here. Just for a card representation of what we're looking at. So on the left, you have the arrows. And as always, my pointer seems to disappear. There it is. Right, so on the left, you see arrows, air, which is overseen by the energy of the shaman. And so this is the focus of what we're going to look at today. And then tomorrow, where it says vessels, water, which is overseen by the seer. Let me go back to the previous screen. So this is the shaman in the spring and the seer in the autumn. So this is where we're going to focus today, and this is where we're going to focus tomorrow. Now, the last video, I also mentioned that, and just a few minutes ago, that the energy of the sun cuts through all of this here. And so the energy of the sun is strongest in the top quarter. It does influence in a waxing way the season of air, and in a waning way the season of vessels, right? And then the moon is strongest in the season of winter. It is waxing in the autumn and waning in the season of air. So where we are right now in the northern hemisphere is here. And where we are in the southern hemisphere right now is here. So in the northern hemisphere, the energy of the moon is waning. And in the southern hemisphere, it's so easy to get this it's also waning. So the energy of the sun is waning. Okay. So there's all these beautiful layers in this deck, and we're going to go through them bit by bit, piece by piece, not meant to overwhelm, just to kind of inform. And I'll go to Well-Tempered Claire's question. Is there any meaning behind being born during one of the cross sections? I am not aware of that, Andrew, and that's something I can definitely look into. Hi there, V. Welcome to our conversation. Okay, so I'm going to switch the image up, and we're going to go to this one here. Okay, so now on the left-hand side, you are looking at only the energy of the air. So we're going to remove these three. And so the shaman is over here on the blue quadrant. And we have the influence of the moon down here and the influence of the sun up here. Okay, so what you're looking on the left is my best shot at this in drawing it in Canva. And then on the right, you're looking at the energy of the cards that support the season of air. What we're not going to talk about today are the major arcana. We'll get to this after several videos. If you look at the bottom of the blue where it says Feb 1 Imbolc, and then up at the top it says May 1 Beltane, and on the left, March 21st Spring Equinox. These quarters and cross quarters also have major arcana that are associated with them, and we're going to get to that in another video. I think we have enough to bite off today, so we're just going to look at the element of air, and we'll look at the majors that bring in each of the seasons in another video. But just so you know, there are 2 major arcana associated with each of the changes of seasons. And there's another major arcana associated with the spring equinox. So there's a lot to kind of digest here. All right, so you can see on top of the arrows, thanks, Andrew. You can see on top of the arrows, I have placed the court cards. And I did mention this last time, but I just want to be crystal clear that where we are right now in the Northern Hemisphere, we are in, and I've got my own little journal over on the right here as well too, looking at many things at the same time. We are in the energy of the Kingfisher. The Kingfisher is the king of arrows. And as we go through this quarter, we go from king to queen to knight to page. And so the energy and the influence of each of the court cards shifts according to the time of the season. We are welcomed in at the beginning of the season with the king, which goes until the 26th of February. So the 1st to the 26th of February. It's about a quarter for each of these. And so if we're just kind of slowly wrapping our head around this, right now, energetically, we have the influence of the moon, the influence of the king of arrows, and the influence of the shaman. And so why don't we pause just for a second and talk about the energy of the shaman, because they sit over this whole season. And if you look to the artwork, this is a shaman, looks a lot more like a shaman than a magician. You do see in this card the 4 elements represented before the shaman. And the thing I feel about this card, which may be a little different than the energy of a magician card, is his shamanic qualities and his powerful connection and vibration in association with the plants, the plant medicine, the animals, his ability to connect with, move through different planes and experiences of life. With the magician card, seeing the magician, it has a slightly different energy for me. So this definitely does carry that shamanic quality, that medicine man type quality. I guess the big question here is, though, why does he live? Why is he, she, the overseer of the element of air? And tomorrow we'll kind of expand on that question, is why is the shaman in the energy of air, and why is the seer, who is the high priestess, in the energy of water? I'm sure some of you can, find an answer to that question quite simply. But we are in, the thing about air, though, is we need to expand not only to the, kind of an RW, even a Marseille association, where air is associated with mind and thought and cleverness and knowledge and wisdom. Yes, we have all of that, but we also have the purest sattvic, that's a Ayurvedic term, purest, highest manifestation of the element of air, which connects us to spirit. And I think that's why the shaman sits here. The shaman opens the beginning of the year, this first season, and in his wisdom, he sits there and he teaches us and he supports everything that goes on through the element of air. And you can see that Andrew has placed in, Mercury also as the element of air. So we have a lot of different associations. So he sits here at the center. And as we go through this season, the influence will change from the moon to the sun, which makes perfect sense as far as weather goes. And then we move through the energy and influences of the court cards. And so we move from the king to the swan, who was the queen. And the thing I like about this deck is that the animals that are chosen to represent the court cards have, there's a lot of thought and a lot of energy that you can put into kind of stepping back and feeling their energy rather than diving into a reference book and saying, okay, what does swan mean? What does swan mean? There's a lot of clues in the artwork here, and they really make it, what I want to say, it's just such a beautiful reflection. The knight is the hawk. And if you know anything about hawks, about how they hunt, about the way they move, it makes perfect sense that this bird would represent a knight and a swan would represent the queen. And if you have other resources, you can pull in those other resources, connecting the swan to other metaphors, other goddesses and things and so forth. And then we have the wren as the page, right? Much smaller bird. And you see here, we're very much in a change of season. One of the things I find difficult is that if the wren is representing up here closer to the sun, why was the wren painted in a winter scene? So for me, that's kind of incongruous with the energy of the deck, because according to the season and the cycle of time, the snow would probably be melted by now, depending on where you live. I mean, I've lived places where there's still snow at this time of year, but just something to think about. Okay, so that's how we move through the court cards. Yeah, it is interesting how they move backwards. All right, now this one is going to get a little bit muddy, and I want to it was hard for me to get it all kind of even and balanced. Built into this deck, there is the potential for timings and to perhaps make choices based on what I want to say, like when to choose to act based on when certain cards come up. And I don't think it's the intention of the creators that you memorize that the 8 of arrows, the 8 of air, is April 4th to 12th. It's not meant to be predictive in that way. I just think it gives a interesting layer to the deck when you understand that the influence of the ace is closest to Imbolc. The ace, 2, and 3 of arrows are connected to the kingfisher. So let me take these ones off and get the arrows. I'm not planning on talking about the individual meanings of the cards. For those of you that don't have this deck, the reference books for this deck are amazing. And we will eventually do some readings with this deck later on in the series, and I'll talk more about the meanings of the cards at that time. But there are 3 reference books available for this, as well as the study group and Facebook and so forth. So here we are. We have moved through the time of the Ace of Arrows. And if you look at this chart, that ended on the 9th of February. So where we sit right now is at the 2 of Arrows. The key word for the 2 of Arrows is injustice. And I find that the keywords in this deck really do help. They help us to understand the slightly different nuances in meaning from other systems, okay? Yeah, V, this is a really, really interesting deck. And so again, we're in the influence of the waning moon, the Kingfisher, and right now the 2 of Arrows and the Shaman, right? So today in the Northern Hemisphere, this is where we are. Excuse me. And so if you look at the dates, each of the minors, Ace through 10, has about 8 or 9 days of the season. And so the Kingfisher has the Ace 2 and 3. And then the Swan. I'm just going to keep these handy in case I need them again. And then we move to the Swan, and the Swan influences the 4. And to me, that's really interesting to connect the Swan with the 4 of Arrows. And so the Swan has the 4, 5, and 6. And so the Queen of Arrows dominates, understands, witnesses these 3 kind of challenging cards in the center of the suit of air. I find that fascinating. Okay, and then we go to the Knight. So this is, we're crossing over into, crossing over the spring equinox, and I'll talk about some of those details in a second. So the Swan, actually that's not true. So the Kingfisher would be the Ace 2 and 3. The Swan would be the 4 and the 5. Both the Swan and the Hawk, touch the spring equinox. Okay, so they both influence the spring equinox. And then we move through with these cards. We have the 4, 5, 6, and 7, which some of them I just showed you. And so this is what I mean. It's not it's not meant to have exact associations. It's just that if we can get a general gist of what touches what, it may, when it comes up in a reading, go, wow, this is a very, it just might help to point to exclamation marks, I guess is what I'm saying or what I'm seeing. And how I let these numbers and these court cards and the sun and the moon and perhaps the overseer of air talk to a reading that is heavy in arrows or something like that. Okay, so I'm just checking in on the chat. Yeah, it's fun to do this with your own cards in hand, isn't it? Woven Pixel. How about at the end today, I'm going to show you the difference between the guidebook and the other 2 books, because I do have all 3 on my table. I'll take a moment to do that. So, you know what I mean? Like it's about It's about influence. It's not about getting stressed out about memorizing that the 6 of arrows. So look at the graphic on the left. The 6 and these 2 court cards and the shaman, there's a line that runs through these 4 cards. And so if I want to move these in here as well too, here at the equinox, we have a lot of influence. So the greatest overlap of influences happen at the equinoxes. And it's really kind of cool. So I don't know what that means for you metaphorically, or if you can read anything into that. And the 6 of harmony, right? 6 is associated with harmony and beauty and peace. The 6s sit at the equinoxes and the solstices. So what does that mean to you? The 6 of air sits at the spring equinox, and the 6 of fire sits at the summer solstice, and the 6 of water sits at the autumnal equinox, and the 6 of stones, the 6 of earth, sits at the winter solstice. So let me know what you read into that. And what I'm introducing here, equinoxes are like major transitional points in the 4 seasons. What does Kristen say about that reminds of the Icelandic stave I have on my car, protection through bad weather. Okay, so yeah, anybody can contribute in the comments later as well too. So I just really feel like these equinoxes are an interesting reflection of these intersections of these cards. Yeah. And then we move to so we're going to move the 6 away. And then we move up to the top portion where we have the knight and the hawk and the wren. And then the baby, isn't it interesting that the page has the heavy numbers? So the page has the 9 and the 10. How is that? This is one of those questions and conversations. So for those of you that have studied the Tree of Life and do Kabbalistic readings and spreads with the tarot, you're probably aware that there's different places in these Tree of Life readings to put the pages and to put the kings. And some people have perfect, clear justification for having the pages at the top of the Tree of Life. And then other people put the king at the top of the Tree of Life and vice versa. So as long as you understand why things are where they are, then you can start to weave in these layers to the tarot or to your spread or to whatever you're working at. Hello, Emily, welcome. Okay, so this question I'm going to leave as an open-ended question, and I'm going to just ask it again just to get you thinking, and I'm going to come back to it tomorrow when we're looking at the seer. So the pages are associated with the big numbers, the 9 and the 10. The kings are associated with the numbers of initiation, the aces, the ace and the 2. Just going to grab them for you. I love this ace. And so without going to any books or any resources, I think this is a really interesting reflection. Why would the kings have the aces? Why do the pages have the 10s? Why is it not the opposite? And is that not even an intended association? Okay, these are all really, really good questions. The pages are the kings are the leaders. The kings bring in the season. The pages see out the season. The pages send the season on its way. The kings welcome. The pages see the season out. So this, it's backwards to what you may be used to, the associations that you're used to. So just, let it sit. Let it sit and just start to digest what that might mean for you. What I have found is that these layers, these little subtle layers, you might be working with a different deck, and all of a sudden you'll go, oh, I understand. That makes perfect sense. And so my best advice is to really give this time. Give it as much time as you need to keep asking these questions. Because I think what's happened in a lot of other decks is we don't ask these questions. We don't make these associations. But what the creators of the Wildwood Tarot, Mark Ryan and John Matthews, have done is they are encouraging us to ask these questions. Okay, so let me, you wanted to look at the books. Okay, so let's look at the books, and then we will, I'm just going to take that off. And we'll go back and we'll look at the books. Okay. I will sort these all out later. These matte cards that I was talking about in my new deck, which is the matte version, they are a bit bendy. I don't know if you can see, they're a bit warped, but still really enjoying them. Okay, so I'm going to show you the 3 books, and then tomorrow we'll come back and look at another suit. This is the guidebook that comes with the deck. Now, I don't know if you can get a small version of the deck, but I definitely would not recommend getting it without the guidebook. And this is a very, very thorough guidebook. You're going to get pretty much everything that you need in the guidebook that comes with the deck. And what I did when I started, a beautiful, beautiful introduction. So on page 26 is where they explain the wheel and how the energy of the deck works with the wheel. And when I started, I've got quite a few journal pages. This is one of my journal pages here. And so I just started to write down things like contemplative yin energy, withdrawing, just drawing some circles and making notes. If this is more yin energy, this is more yang energy. Yeah, these are known as fire festivals. These are fixed dates. What is this here? Just a second here. I need to think what this refers to. Oh, I remember this. So this is talking about the May 1st, the November 1st, August 1st, February 1st are fixed dates, and they're known as fire festivals. I don't know why I wrote that there. So these are known as fire festivals. And then the solstices and the equinoxes are not fixed dates, right? They change with the seasons. And so in going through the book, I just started to draw and write in my journal. Now, in the guidebook here, let me zoom in just a little bit so you can see. I just found it really necessary to start marking up pages and writing like air and spring. And while a lot of this is explained in the text, part of my process was to go through and to put a symbol on pretty much all of the cards in the deck. And so you get a really nice description of Will Worthington's artwork, and then it talks about the meaning and reading points. It's not a lot for the depth of the deck. And the guidebook doesn't go into the specificity of the dates. I'm going to show you the other two books in just a second. And so, for example, here, these are some notes that I made for myself, and this is information from one of the other books, that the King of Arrows rules over February 1st to 26th. At the beginning of the suit, you get a nice little summary bit of information, okay? And at the back of this one, you have quite a few spreads. And I really like this spread. This is my favorite one. This is the bow spread. Maybe we'll do that in a little bit. Not today, but in one of the subsequent videos. So that's the guidebook that comes with the deck. Now, I don't know if it's changed at all. This is the version from my first deck. I didn't even look at the difference between the other one. And then there's two other books. One is called Wild Magic, also written by Mark Ryan and John Matthews. And then there is A Year in the Wildwood. And this one is written by Alison Cross. And Alison worked with them through the Greenwood as well as the Wildwood. And I'm going to show you the difference between these two books. This book is one of those nice books that that has its built-in markers at the front and the back. That I don't even know what you call these, but I use them for bookmarks. And this one is divided into two sections: study and practice. It's really well written, and if you want to dive a little bit deeper into the deck, so some chapters are written by Mark and some chapters are written by John, and their style of writing is a little bit different, but it's really beautiful. In part 2, there are different practices to start to understand the deck, and let's go to that. Let's go to the back here. This will show you. And this ties in really beautiful with our next step of where we're going in the Facebook group. Okay, let me zoom out again so you can see. So part 2 is practice. Working with the archetypes. There's a little section about journeying and how to journey. Meditations, journeys, pathways, and clues. So this one has lots of really practical ideas. It's called a workbook, but there's no space for writing in it, like you would think a workbook would be. So you would need to, so what I've done is, as I've done some of this, you have your journal beside you, right? So it's called a workbook, but it doesn't exactly look like a workbook. The book that Ellison wrote, this is the star card. I love this card because here we have the Fool, right? The Fool moving into the Wildwood. Sorry, I haven't checked in with the chat. I will go back and do that in a moment. So this one goes into tremendous detail. Allison talks about starting your journey with the Wildwood at any time of year, but optimally starting it at either, let me just put up that graphic for you so you can see. Either starting your journey at Imbolc or Beltane or Lammas or Samhain, so that it's just easier to follow along if you start at one of those times of year. And so one of the things in this book is that you don't get all of the names that are associated with some of the seasons. And so I've made other notes. They do not refer to spring equinox as Ostara or summer solstice as Litha. And if you use these names, you may need to write these in as you go through the book. And so here, just a second, I want to go to. So what the book does is it starts at the time of arrows, February 1st to May 1st. It gives you a little overview. And then she goes through the shaman. The ancestor and the pole star are the majors that bring in Imbolc. And then she goes to the ace and talks about the energy of the ace. So this book goes through the cards in the order of the year starting at Imbolc. But you could use it, at, what am I saying? You could go through, you don't have to go through the book in order. You can start that book exactly where you are, and you don't really miss out on anything as long as you start it at, where our season begins. Okay, so I hope that clarifies a little bit, helps with where you're at. Okay. All right. I don't see myself tagged anywhere. You would like to look at my journals, would you, Andrew? You're not looking at my journals. Some of my journals are very pretty, and others are very, very, very messy. Let's go to Emily's question here. Oh, where was the question? Here's the question. How did you decide which decks to study for your Hanged Man decks? I chose decks that I've had a lot of requests about. Somebody had encouraged in the late fall, early winter about the primordial and what my take was on that. At that point, I hadn't seen it, and I had a really strong gut reaction to it. And so I knew I wanted to explore it a little bit. So I decided to put some energy into that. So that kind of prompted the whole series. And people have been asking me for a long time to do videos on the Tarot of the She, and I haven't done one. And that's another deck that I feel very passionate about. And so I suppose all of the decks in this series that you will see are decks that I feel very passionate about, that I connect with deeply, that I have done some work with, some more than others. The Primordial was fairly new to my collection, but I felt very passionate about it. So yeah, so each of the decks in this series, there's definitely an emotional response by me or from me. And I went to kind of, I don't know, regrettably or not, it was one of those, I'm planning to, I ordered this on eBay. This is the Primordial original version. So I mostly ordered it because I wanted to look at the little white book, but also there was something about it. So all of these decks, I feel something very strongly. So that's why they're here. And I like decks that challenge me. Okay. Ooh, there's some good. That's good. Oh, I can't highlight that. That's way back. I'm trying to highlight from YouTube. That doesn't work. Okay, I want to speak to what another comment that Emily said. Just let me go back to Andrew. Also, kings have an independent energy, which I could correlate with the aces, and how pages need support from family groups. Ah, that's an interesting reflection. Yeah. Okay, so I think this is important. And that is, if we understand the structure, right? If we understand the foundation of the deck, rather than getting lost in the different meanings of the cards, it makes it a whole lot easier. A whole lot easier. And so that's why I'm starting with the structure. And you don't have to memorize the 5 cards that are, and like, there's no quiz here, right? There's no test. If I say March 17th, you don't need to know the 5 cards that are associated with March 17th, but have a general idea. Okay, the shaman is the overseer. It's the time of air. It's not the king. It's not the wren. You know, it's somewhere in the middle. Just stuff like that. It just helps, right? It helps for me anyway to kind of to build the base. And then we can start to add in some of the interesting and amazing stories and mythology and layers that the creators have built into the artwork with Will Worthington. Okay, so I'm going to leave you today with that pile of information. And tomorrow we are going to go to the other side of the wheel, because I thought it would be it'd be good, because our friends in the southern hemisphere are on, that's where they are right now. And I know there's a few that watch my channel. And I just thought it'd be good to talk about that, and, you know, to have an understanding of what's on the other side of the equinox, to look at the 2 equinoxes together, and then we'll look at the top and the bottom. Okay. And then we'll go back, and there's lots of other things we can build in. So this is going to go on for a little while. This might be the longest series within the series within the series. And so I'm making a playlist of all the Wildwood videos, so you can come back to them at any time. Okay. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see some of you later for book club. Namaste.